Why was she even there? That was the first thought that crossed the minds of every operator on the range that afternoon. A woman, walking calmly across the concrete like she had every right to be in the heart of most restricted training grounds. Civilian clothes, ponytail tucked tight, gray-blue eyes steady as stone. She didn't belong, not in a world built by men who had carried rifles across deserts and mountains. Not in the place where a record had stood for 20 years, untouched by anyone brave or foolish enough to challenge it. And yet there she was. The younger SEALs leaned back in amusement, smirks tugging at their lips. They'd seen arrogance before, but this felt different, audacious, maybe even. Staff Sergeant Brooks, broad shoulders crossed, muttered under his breath, "Wrong gate, lady." The team's sharpshooter chuckled. "Give her 2 minutes. She'll be lost back in admin." But she didn't leave. She walked straight toward the man every operator there respected without question, Master Chief James Granite Wilson, 62 years old, weathered face like carved sandstone. The man who still held the base's impossible record, a 1,200-meter shot dead center with a 20 years untouched, 20 years of pride. Wilson squinted at the stranger. "Ma'am, this is a restricted area. You must be lost." His tone was measured, not unkind but dismissive, like he'd said it 100 times before to tourists wandering too close. But the woman didn't flinch. She met his gaze. "I'm not lost, Master Sergeant," she said, quietly but firmly, using a rank he hadn't worn in decades. The sound of it made him freeze. "I'm here to break your record." Silence, the kind that drops like a hammer. Even the gulls circling over the bay seemed to pause. Nearly laughed. Brooks shook his head in disbelief. Hayes, standing beside Wilson, studied her with curiosity. Who was she? And how in the world did she know Wilson's old rank? The answer came with a name: Alexis Morgan, Lieutenant, 75th Ranger Regiment. The name hit Wilson harder than any bullet. Morgan. He'd known that name once in another war, another lifetime. Mark Morgan, Phantom, they used to call him. The best sniper Wilson had ever served with. The man who had covered his extraction in Somalia, 1993. The man who never came home. And now his daughter stood here, staring at him with those same gray-blue eyes. She carried more than a rifle, Wilson realized. She carried a legacy. But to the SEALs gathered, she was still just an outsider, and outsiders weren't welcomed on this range. "Lieutenant," Hayes said cautiously, "this isn't a proving ground for visitors. SEAL qualification takes years. If you're here for the tour, it leaves from the admin building." "I'm not here for a tour," she replied, her voice steady. "Commander Richards approved my presence. I'm here for cross-training, and I intend to break the chief's record while I'm here." The SEALs exchanged glances again, but their smirks faded as Alexis approached the rifle laid out on the table, the M82A1. She ran her hands over it like a mechanic inspecting an engine, checking chamber, scope, mount, bolt carrier. No hesitation, no fumbling. Her movements were second nature. Wilson watched her quietly, old memories resurfacing. Mark Morgan had moved like that, confident, calculated, deadly. "She's bluffing," whispered to Brooks, but even as he said it, he wasn't sure anymore. Alexis looked up. Mark Mod 7 and Bender scope, custom trigger at 2.5 pounds. She paused, adjusting the bolt with expert precision. Heavier than the Shay I usually run, but better stability in crosswinds above 15 knots. Silence again, this time not mocking, this time measured, observant. Wilson's lips curved in the faintest smile. "Mark would be proud," he said quietly. The words made her pause just for a second. Her composure slipped, replaced by something softer, something human. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared. She straightened, eyes back on the target downrange. 1,200 meters, Wilson's record, 20 years unbroken. She wasn't here for glory, he could see it now. She was here for something else, something heavier. When she pulled a weather meter from her pocket and began gathering data, Wilson's suspicions deepened. This wasn't a stunt. This was preparation, methodical, scientific. A woman who had been trained, not taught. A woman who had spent years calculating bullets through wind, heat, and chaos. And then she said the name. The surgeon. Wilson felt his blood run cold. Victor, a ghost from the old days. A contractor turned terrorist. A sniper trained by the CIA once upon a time. The man whispered about in dark corners. The man who never missed. Alexis's voice was quiet but filled with conviction. I believe he was in Mogadishu. I believe he arranged my father's death. Her jaw tightened. 3 years ago, he killed my mother too. Wilson studied her, realization hitting hard. This wasn't about a record. This was about vengeance or justice, maybe both. And now it all made sense. The scar at her temple, the way her hands never trembled, the relentless focus in her eyes. This wasn't just Mark Morgan's daughter. This was a hunter. She lay prone, cheek pressed against the stock, breathing slowed into that perfect rhythm only the best shooters ever mastered. Her body became still, almost statuesque. Send it when ready, Wilson said softly. The roared, the .50 caliber round tearing across nearly a mile of open air. For a heartbeat, nothing. Then the target, dead center, erupted. Gasp, silence. Before anyone could even react, she cycled the bolt and fired again. Another thunderous shot, another impossible hit. A double tap at 1,200 meters. Jaw hung open, Brooks' arms dropped to his sides. Even Hayes muttered, "That's impossible." But it was. She had done it twice. Wilson stared, something tightening in his chest. Ghost trailing, she explained calmly. A technique my father was developing before he died. I finished it. And in that moment, Wilson knew. She wasn't just carrying a legacy, she was building her own. The range officer barely had time to call the score before alarms erupted across base. Red lights flashing, sirens wailing. Commander Richards burst in, urgency etched into every line of her face. Wilson, Hayes, get your team geared up. Now, hostage situation. 12 American personnel, 3 diplomats, and a nuclear physicist. Afghanistan-Pakistan border, wheels up in 30. The SEALs snapped to motion, years of muscle memory kicking in. Weapons checked, gear secured, smirks gone. This was no longer a training ground. This was real. And Richards turned to Alexis. Lieutenant Morgan, your counter-sniper expertise is now mission critical. Intel confirms at least 8 enemy marksmen in Overwatch. Without you, the team won't make it past the compound walls. Wilson's eyes narrowed. He saw the truth now. This wasn't coincidence. This was orchestration. Alexis hadn't just walked into his range on a whim. She'd been brought here. And when Richards confirmed the hostage-taker's identity, the surgeon, Wilson understood everything. Alexis had stepped into the shadow of her father's death. And now, the man who had orchestrated it was waiting for her. Only this time, she wasn't a child watching from the sidelines. This time, she was the one carrying the rifle. And somewhere in her eyes, those gray-blue eyes her father had passed down, Wilson saw it clearly. The record was just the beginning. The real test was still waiting. What kind of man waits 30 years to finish a war? That was the question that gnawed at Alexis as the C-17 thundered through the night sky. The air inside the transport was thick with tension, the hum of tactical displays cutting through the silence like a warning. She sat alone near the rear ramp, helmet in her lap, rifle secured across her knees. To anyone else, she looked composed, maybe even calm. But inside her chest, her heart pressed heavy against her ribs. Not from fear, not exactly, but from the weight of inevitability. This wasn't just another mission. This was personal. And she knew it. Across from her, Hayes briefed the team. Maps spread out, hands pointing, gestures sharp. He spoke with the confidence of a man who had led operators through 100 firefights and walked out every time. Skeptical earlier, now leaned in, questions measured. Brooks checked his gear with ritual-like precision, lips pressed thin. The others listened, absorbed. They were professionals. But even professionals couldn't ignore the unspoken truth hanging between them. The mission wasn't theirs alone anymore. It was hers. Wilson, buckled into a command seat near the bulkhead, kept his eyes on her. He'd insisted on coming despite Richard's objections. Too old for the field, maybe, but not too old to recognize when history was looping back on itself. He had seen this before: another Morgan, another war, another trap. The difference was that this time, he wasn't watching her father walk into the crosshairs. He was watching his daughter. And that haunted him more than he wanted to admit. High altitude, high opening, Alexis explained to the group, stepping into the briefing without being asked. Her voice was steady, clipped, professional. We jump at 30,000 feet, oxygen systems on. Silent glide approach, 15 miles to target ridge. We land undetected, or this ends before it begins. Hayes studied her. He didn't doubt her skill anymore. Not after that shot on the range. But there was something in the way she spoke, as if she wasn't just planning the mission. As if she was planning her own reckoning. 8 sniper positions, she continued, pointing to the tactical map projected on the bulkhead. Interlocking fields of fire, a textbook death zone, any approach on the ground without counter-sniper support, catastrophic. Then what's the play? Brooks asked. Alexis drew in a breath. Sequential neutralization. I take them out in order, creating a shadow corridor. Narrow window, maybe 2 minutes, that's when you breach. 8 shots in under 2 minutes, raised a brow. Through shifting winds, moving targets, elevated ground, that's impossible, Brooks finished for him. Alexis met their doubt with a calm that unsettled them more than bravado ever could. It's not impossible, it's what has to be done. Wilson leaned forward, voice gravelly. She's right, and she can do it. The weight of his certainty silenced the cabin. But Alexis wasn't done. Her hand traced the map again, eyes narrowing on a ridge line to the east. A cave system, concealed, perfect line of sight. The 9th position, she murmured. They all turned. What 9th? Hayes asked. The surgeon's insurance, she said flatly. He won't trust anyone else with the final angle. He'll be there, waiting for me. The name hung in the air like smoke. The surgeon, Victor. Wilson's jaw tightened. He remembered the man, brilliant, dangerous, unstable. A ghost who had slipped through decades of wars, leaving bodies in his wake. And now, finally, here he was again, waiting with the patience of a predator who had baited the perfect trap. He trained me, Alexis admitted, her voice quieter now, words landing like stones. Not directly, but through my father's journals, through a Russian defector who carried some methods west. Everything I know about extreme-range shooting traces back to him. She paused, then added, this isn't just an ambush, it's a game, his game. One he's been preparing for since 1993. Brooks leaned back, arms folded. So he knows how you'll move. Yes, Alexis said simply. Every technique, every trick, because he taught them to my father, because I inherited them. He'll expect all of it. Hayes frowned. Then how do you beat someone who already knows your playbook? She lifted her eyes, and for the first time since stepping on the aircraft, a flicker of fire burned there. By showing him I'm not just my father's daughter, I'm something else. Wilson's throat tightened. He'd heard those words before, years ago. Mark Morgan had once said them before a mission no one thought he could survive. And he hadn't. But his daughter carried something more. The aircraft jolted as turbulence shook the fuselage. This voice crackled over comms. 10 minutes to drop. Masks went on. Final checks began. Hayes moved through the cabin, patting shoulders, adjusting straps. Murmured something under his breath, maybe a prayer. Brooks cracked his neck, steadying himself. And Alexis sat in silence, oxygen mask hissing, eyes locked on the dark horizon through the small circular window. She wasn't praying. She wasn't hopping. She was remembering. Her father's words, her mother's determination, the years of training on cold mountainsides. And above it all, the face of the man who had taken everything from her. The surgeon. Wilson's voice broke through her thoughts. Alexis. She turned, meeting his gaze. Mark made me promise something, he said, his voice low, almost drowned out by the roar of engines. If he didn't make it back, he told me to look after his family. I failed your mother. I failed you. But I won't fail you now. Her jaw clenched, but she nodded once. No words, none were needed. The jump light shifted from red to green. One by one, the operators moved to the ramp, bodies swallowed by the endless black of the night sky. Then Alexis stepped forward, her rifle slung tight, wind screaming past her as the ramp yawned open. For a second, the world held still. And then she was gone, plunging into the abyss, 30,000 feet above the border, falling toward a destiny that had waited 3 decades, toward a man who had orchestrated her father's death, toward the game only one of them could finish. And somewhere far below, the surgeon was waiting. What does silence sound like at 30,000 feet? For Alexis, it was the rush of wind in her ears, the steady hiss of oxygen in her mask, and the deep, unnatural calm inside her chest. Falling through the night sky was chaos to most people. To her, it was clarity. She adjusted her body, correcting for the drag of the rifle strapped across her torso. The wasn't built for skydives, and every ounce of its weight pulled her slightly off balance. She compensated automatically, angling her arms, shifting her knees, finding symmetry in the storm. Through her night vision goggles, the world below came alive in muted green. Rugged ridges, dark valleys, scattered lights from villages clinging to the mountainsides. And somewhere in that shadowed maze, the compound, the bait, the cage. 5 other canopies bloomed behind her, perfect formation, disciplined as always. Hayes, Brooks, 2 more operators, Poseidon team, each one trusting her more than they wanted to admit, because now their lives depended on a sniper they had mocked less than 24 hours ago. Ghost Hunter, Poseidon lead, wind check. Hayes's voice crackled over encrypted comms. She glanced at her wrist instrument. Steady northwest, 25 knots, expect turbulence on descent. Her tone was calm, flat, the kind of voice that didn't leave room for panic. Copy that, Hayes replied, adjusting glide path. One by one, their parachutes deployed, silent silhouettes against the star-drenched sky. Alexis pulled her cord, canopy opening with a muted snap, and they dissolved into a ghostly glide. The mountains seemed to rise to meet her, jagged teeth of rock and shadow. Wilson's voice cut in from the command aircraft circling miles away. Ghost Hunter, granite. Satellite confirms temperature inversion forming. You'll get downdrafts on the eastern approach. Watch your descent line. Copy, she said. Her tone gave away nothing, but inside she marked the warning like she marked every variable. The air itself was a weapon out here, invisible but deadly. For long minutes they drifted, nothing but the whisper of wind through canopy cells, the creak of harness straps. Quiet, too quiet. Then a flash, barely perceptible, not a mistake, not the kind of careless glint rookies made. This was deliberate. Granite, she said softly. Possible signature, grid Echo 7, confirm. Wilson's reply came seconds later. Thermal scan shows 3 heat signatures, not an original brief. Mobile Electronic Warfare Unit. Alexis's stomach tightened. The surgeon was already moving pieces on the board. Recommend radio discipline, she advised. Possible signal interception. No one argued. The comms went quieter, shorter, only essential words. The valley spread out beneath her like an open book. She recognized formations from satellite imagery, the jagged ridge that concealed the compound, the funnel-shaped valley that would turn into a death trap if they stepped wrong. And then her radio hissed. Not Wilson, not Hayes, a voice she hadn't heard in years but had imagined in every nightmare. Smooth, cultured, with just enough of a Russian lilt to sharpen every syllable. Welcome to my mountains, little ghost. Her blood ran cold, but her hands didn't flinch. I've been waiting for this reunion. The surgeon had made first contact. The game had begun. Dawn came slow, painting the mountains blood red. Alexis was already prone in her overwatch position, rifle assembled, optics scanning the valley. She had touched down silently, moved like a shadow, established concealment. The others were 3 kilometers west, staging for the assault. Through her scope she saw the compound. Rectangular buildings clustered like bones. A central structure housing the hostages, guard towers, patrols, and above it all the overwatch positions. She counted them carefully. 1, 2, 3, 8 in total, each perfectly placed, overlapping fields of fire. It was a fortress, a trap disguised as a stronghold. And somewhere beyond her scope, in the place no drone could see, was the 9th position. His. Poseidon in position. Tides favorable, Hayes whispered over comms, their coded phrase for ready. Stand by, Alexis replied. She pulled out her weather meter, recorded wind speed, temperature, barometric pressure, scribbled notes into her father's leather-bound journal. Numbers, corrections, adjustments. To anyone else it was madness. To her it was survival. And still his voice came, sliding into her ear like a blade. I taught you patience, did I? The surgeon's words were calm, almost conversational. But did I teach you enough? She ignored him, focused on the data. Your father lacked patience, the voice continued. In Mogadishu, that's why he died. Her finger brushed the trigger of her rifle, not to fire but to ground herself. Not yet, not until the first shot counted. Instead, she spoke quietly into her mic. Granite, status on hostages. Wilson's reply came grim. Command received ransom video. They've moved one into the courtyard. Male, Department of Energy physicist. Beaten, but alive. They're demanding prisoner release in 6 hours. 6 hours? They didn't have 6 hours. Not with a man like the surgeon running the show. She made her decision. Primary Overwatch eliminations commence in 90 minutes. Poseidon, prepare to breach on my mark. Conditions won't be stable by then, Wilson warned. The surgeon accelerated the clock, Alexis replied. We play with the time we have. Through her scope she caught movement. Guards dragging the hostage back inside. The sun rose higher, heating the valley, shifting winds unpredictably. For most snipers, this would be suicide. For her, it was a pattern waiting to be read. Wilson must have heard the calm in her voice. Alexis, remember Basra, Desert Storm, when I had to take the shot through a dust storm? She almost smiled, faint and fleeting. Pattern recognition in chaos, she said softly. Exactly. That was the game now, finding patterns in the storm. She adjusted her calculations, waiting for the first thermal window to open. Not perfection, not stability, but a fleeting alignment of wind and sun and terrain. One chance in the chaos. And while she prepared, the surgeon's voice whispered again. I know what you're planning, little ghost. Shadow corridor, clever, but you've overlooked one thing. She closed her eyes, steadied her breathing. Your father thought he understood the environment too, the surgeon said. His arrogance killed 12 men. The word stung, deliberately, a blade twisted where it hurt most. She exhaled slowly, reopened her eyes and pressed her cheek against the rifle. Target 1, she murmured. Through the scope she lined up the first sniper, 950 meters, camouflaged, disciplined but not disciplined enough. Her finger tightened, and the valley exploded with thunder. What does it take to pull a trigger knowing one mistake could end 12 lives? Alexis felt the weight of that answer in every breath, every heartbeat, every ounce of pressure against the rifle's trigger. The valley stretched out before her like an execution ground. Wind whipped, sun rose higher, heat rippled across the horizon. Conditions no sane sniper would choose, but this wasn't choice. This was necessity. Her scope locked on the first target. Camouflage netting draped over a boulder, faint shimmer of heat betraying the sniper beneath. Range, 950 meters. Wind, gusting, unpredictable. She made her correction, half-clicked to compensate for a rising crosswind, calculated the bullet's drift against the warming air. Her finger squeezed. The roared recoil slamming into her shoulder. The enemy sniper never moved again. "One down," she whispered. On comms, Hayes's voice responded instantly. "Copy, Poseidon advancing." But Alexis wasn't celebrating. She was already shifting, bolt sliding with mechanical precision, scanning for target 2. Every second mattered. 900 meters, concealed in a ridge hollow, breathing, patient, waiting for someone else to make the first mistake. She gave him no chance. Crack, thunder rolled. Target 2 collapsed into shadow. Her pulse remained steady, but beneath the calm something burned. Anger, yes, but more than that. A deep ache she'd carried for years. Each shot wasn't just an elimination. It was a ledger being balanced, a debt carved into her bloodline since Mogadishu. But then the surgeon's voice slid back into her ear, smooth, inevitable. "Impressive, you move quickly. Your father was slower, less precise, but he had one advantage you lack." She ignored him, adjusted her scope. Target 3, elevation 1,100 meters, heavier crosswind. She dialed corrections. "Do you know what that advantage was, little ghost?" She exhaled, squeezed. The third sniper fell. "He didn't care about winning," the surgeon said softly. "He only cared about survival. You want to prove something, and that makes you vulnerable." Her teeth clenched, but her voice stayed calm on comms. 3 down, corridor opening. "Poseidon copies," Hayes replied, his voice low, urgent. She imagined them moving fast between rocks, shadows darting under her cover. Every second counted. The fourth target was harder, nearly 1,200 meters, tucked behind a burned-out tree trunk. Only the faintest shimmer gave him away. She steadied, adjusted, fired. The round cracked wood, splintered bark, and when the dust cleared, the sniper lay still. 4. But the surgeon's voice didn't stop. "Your mother was strong," he said, almost tender. "Too strong for her own good. She should have walked away. She should have left the past buried. But she couldn't, could she? She followed your father's ghost until I silenced her too." The words stabbed like glass. Alexis's vision blurred for half a second, rage clawing at her control. She blinked hard, forced it down. "Not now. Not here." Her voice cracked through comms. 4 down, continue advance." "Copy," Hayes replied. 200 meters to compound wall." She inhaled, long and steady. The fifth sniper waited at 800 meters, crouched behind a rusted vehicle husk. Easy shot, too easy. "Drab." She hesitated, then shifted her aim higher. A faint glimmer in the rocks above. Another rifle, another Overwatch. She smiled faintly. "You almost had me." The shot rang out. Target 5 fell. 5 down, corridor widening. The SEALs pushed forward, fast now, zigzagging between natural cover. She could hear their breaths over comms, could feel their trust settling on her shoulders like a second rifle. The sixth target. She found him in a collapsed watchtower, 1,100 meters. Angled shot through broken beams. Calculations spun in her mind, angle, wind, bullet drop. Her father's voice whispered in memory, "Trust the math, trust yourself." Crack, beam shattered, enemy fell. 6. Poseidon at outer wall, Hayes said, setting breach charges. Alexis's throat tightened. She had 2 left before the corridor closed, 2 left before the SEALs were blind. The surgeon spoke again, quieter now, more intimate. "Your father begged, you know, not for himself, for you. He thought I would spare you. He was wrong." Her finger froze above the trigger. Rage boiled, sharp and dangerous. She wanted to scream into the comms, demand proof, demand silence. But instead she exhaled and pulled the trigger. Target 7 dropped. Her breath shuddered. Her hands trembled for the first time. Wilson's voice cut in, calm, grounding. "Alexis, focus on the mission. Don't let him inside your head." But he was already inside. She could feel him, coiled like a snake around her memories. One target left, the 8th sniper. She scanned, searching, time running thin. The SEALs were seconds from breaching. There, rooftop of the compound, last overwatch. 950 meters, clear shot. She steadied, heartbeat loud in her ears. The surgeon's whisper came again. "If you fire now, I'll kill a hostage, right now, in front of you." She froze. Through her scope, movement in the courtyard. A hostage dragged out, gun pressed to his head. "No," Wilson barked. "It's a bluff, take the shot." Her heart raced. If she fired, the last overwatch would fall. The SEALs would be safe. But if he was telling the truth? The guard pressed the gun harder against the hostage's skull. Her breath caught. The surgeon laughed. "Choose, little ghost, save them or save yourself." The world narrowed to her crosshairs, her finger, her heartbeat. And then she made the choice. The shot thundered across the valley. The rooftop sniper fell backward, rifle clattering against concrete. And in the courtyard, the hostage still lived. Silence on comms, then Hayes's voice sharp and urgent. "Breach, breach, breach." Explosions shook the valley as charges ripped open the compound walls. SEALs stormed in, gunfire erupting in violent bursts. Alexis exhaled, the air leaving her like a release of years. 8 down, corridor clear. But the voice came again. "Clever girl," the surgeon whispered. "You've earned this much, now come find me." Her scope swung east, toward the hidden ridge. The 9th position, his position. And for the first time, her hands trembled not from anger, but from something colder. Because she knew what waited there. Not just a sniper, not just a killer. The man who had destroyed her family. The duel she had been born into. The final test. How do you hunt a man who has been hunting you since before you were born? That question haunted Alexis as she crawled through the dust, every inch forward scraping her elbows raw against jagged rock. The SEALs had stormed the compound behind her. She could hear distant bursts of gunfire, muffled explosions, men shouting through broken walls. The mission was still alive. The hostages were still inside, but she was no longer watching them. She was moving toward something else, something darker. Her scope was capped, rifle strapped tight across her back. This wasn't Overwatch anymore. This was stalker against stalker. The surgeon's ridge loomed ahead. High ground, perfect concealment. If he was anywhere, he was there, and he was waiting. She slowed her breathing, chest pressed flat against the earth. Every sound mattered now. Every scrape, every shift, every stone turned by her knee could be the sound that gave her away. She moved like a shadow through the rocks, inch by inch, refusing to let impatience betray her. In her earpiece, the comms buzzed with life. Hayes calling positions, reporting resistance. Brooks shouting about charges on the inner wall, Wilson urging them forward. Then his voice cut in raspy, deliberate. "Alexis, report." She froze. Wilson, granite, the one man who knew what she was doing. But she didn't reply. "Alexis," he repeated, "don't shut me out." Her jaw tightened. She clicked her mic once, acknowledgement, nothing more. Because words weren't safe anymore, not when the surgeon was listening. The ridge rose taller, closer, a shadow swallowing the early sun. She slid into a shallow depression in the earth, paused, scanned. The ground smelled of oil and cordite. She adjusted her scope and peered through. The valley stretched wide beneath her. Smoke rose from the compound, black plumes curling like fingers into the sky. Through her optics, she caught glimpses of the SEALs moving, hostages being pulled to safety. A firefight raged, but progress was being made. And then her scope drifted higher, to the ridge line above. Empty. Too empty. No shimmer of heat, no silhouette against the rocks, no mistake, no accident, no careless reveal. He wasn't there. Or he was there so perfectly hidden that he might as well have been carved from the mountain itself. She exhaled. This was his game, always his game. Then his voice slipped into her ear again. Calm, gentle, poison. You're close now. Her pulse spiked. Do you know what I remember most about Mogadishu? He asked. Not the firefight, not the chaos, not even your father's last breath. She pressed herself lower into the dirt, scanning. Nothing. It was the sound, the surgeon whispered. The sound of a little girl screaming when she heard the news. Her throat tightened. She hadn't screamed. She remembered that day vividly, but she hadn't screamed. She had sat on the floor, silent, paralyzed, as soldiers told her mother the truth. And yet somehow he knew. Because someone had told him. Her father. Her hands trembled before she clenched them into fists. Where are you? She whispered, not into calms but to herself. Closer than you think, the surgeon answered. Her body stilled. Slowly, carefully, she scanned again. Her scope swept across the ridge, over rock outcroppings, across brush scattered by the wind. Nothing. And then she realized something. He wasn't up high. He was down low. She shifted her rifle sharply to the left, scanning the slope beneath the ridge. And there, barely perceptible, a crack in the earth. A cave. Her heart kicked hard, that was it. She slid lower, crawling toward it. Every muscle screamed with the need for silence. Every nerve begged her to hurry. She reached the shadow of the cave mouth, stopped, listened. Breathing. Slow, patient, the kind of breathing only snipers learned. He was inside. Her hand hovered over her sidearm, but she didn't draw it. A pistol meant desperation. She wasn't desperate. Not yet. She reached back, unslung her rifle, chambered around with deliberate quiet. The sound of metal sliding into place echoed in her bones. The breathing stopped. Silence. Then a laugh, soft, terrifying. You are better than him, the surgeon said from inside the cave. Stronger, sharper, but you're still predictable. The barrel of his rifle flashed in the shadows. She rolled sideways as the shot cracked, stone exploding where her head had been. She pressed flat to the earth, heart hammering. Another shot. Dust filled her mouth, stung her eyes. He wasn't guessing. He was tracking. Every movement, every hesitation, he was inside her rhythm already. She rolled again, fired a blind shot into the darkness. The blast lit the cave for a split second. Empty. No, not empty. A shadow moved deeper, retreating into the cave's depths. He was drawing her in. Her breath slowed, steadied. This was it, the duel. She slipped into the darkness, rifle raised, eyes adjusting to the black. The world shrank to a tunnel, walls pressing close, the smell of gunpowder thick in the air. Somewhere ahead, his voice echoed. You want to kill me, don't you? Her boots shifted against stone. She froze. Go on, admit it. This isn't about justice. It isn't about the hostages. It isn't even about your father anymore. It's about hunger. The hunger that lives in every killer. The hunger I taught you to feed. She gritted her teeth, whispered, You taught me nothing. Silence. Then another laugh. If that were true, you wouldn't be here. A crack of light split the cave, his muzzle flash. The bullet sparked against stone inches from her cheek. She dove behind a jagged outcropping, chest heaving. He was toying with her, like he had toyed with her father. And the realization struck hard. This wasn't just a duel. This was a mirror. She was fighting the man who had shaped her without ever touching her. Fighting the darkness she had inherited the moment she picked up a rifle. Her throat tightened, her eyes burned. She pressed her forehead against the stone and whispered to herself, I'm not him, I'm not you. Her father's words echoed in her mind. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. She lifted her rifle. And for the first time, she wasn't hunting the surgeon. She was hunting herself. How long can a heartbeat hide in silence? Alexis pressed herself against the jagged cave wall, chest tight, lungs burning from holding air too long. Darkness pressed around her, thick and absolute. Every sound carried here, the scrape of a boot, the click of a safety, even the swallow of dry saliva. One mistake and the surgeon would hear. And she knew he was listening. The cave smelled of iron and dust, the stale air clinging to her throat. Her eyes adjusted slowly, picking out faint shapes, stone ridges, a sloping tunnel, a scatter of old supplies abandoned by smugglers or fighters long ago. But no silhouette of the man she hunted. No, the man who hunted her. His voice floated through the dark, smooth, calm, terrifyingly patient. "You've come farther than your father ever did." Her hands clenched on the rifle. "He panicked, that's why he died. Fear makes hands shake, makes men stupid. But you're calm, almost too calm. That's how I know you're his daughter." She shifted slightly, pressing her cheek against the stock, scanning the shadows. Nothing. "Do you know why I chose him?" the surgeon continued. "Out of all the men on that street in Mogadishu, why I focused on Mark Morgan." Her stomach knotted. She wanted to block out his words, but every syllable cut through her armor like glass. "Because he reminded me of myself. The same obsession, the same hunger, and now, a pause, deliberate, chilling. I see it in you." Her throat tightened. She wanted to scream back, to fire blindly into the dark and end this voice, but she didn't. She forced her breath into stillness. Her father had taught her that discipline wasn't about control, it was about endurance. The surgeon shifted somewhere ahead. Not footsteps, too skilled for that, just the faint displacement of air. She raised her rifle, adjusted, froze. The sound came again, to the left this time. He was circling. Her heart pounded so loudly she was sure he could hear it. She closed her eyes, counted. 1, 2, 3, slow, even. And then she remembered her father's journal. His handwriting scrawled after long nights of waiting. "Don't chase the ghost. Let the ghost reveal itself." She exhaled. And she waited. For long minutes the cave was silent. Too silent. The kind of silence that eats at your nerves until you want to scream just to hear something human. Sweat slid down her spine, pooling beneath her body armor. Her trigger finger ached from tension. Then a flicker. Not light, not sound. A feeling. The subtle shift of presence, like being watched from a place you can't see. She swung her scope toward the sensation and saw him. For a heartbeat, just a shadow between boulders, tall, still, rifle raised. She fired. The cave exploded with thunder. But the shadow vanished, a decoy. Stone shattered inches from her cheek as his round slammed into the wall beside her. Shards cut her skin, warm blood dripping down her jaw. Her teeth clenched. He was toying with her, just like he had toyed with her father. Another shot cracked. Sparks rained from stone. She rolled deeper into the cave, chest heaving. "You feel it now, don't you?" his voice whispered. "The truth. You and I, we're the same. You don't come here for justice. You come here because you need me." "No," she whispered, too soft for him to hear. "Your father needed me too," the surgeon said. "He needed me to show him his limits. And you came here to prove you have none." Her jaw locked. "You're wrong." But the word echoed off the cave walls, carrying farther than she meant. Silence followed. Then a soft laugh. "There you are." Her pulse spiked. She dove sideways as another shot cracked, the bullet carving sparks off the stone where she'd crouched. She slid behind cover, gasping, chest burning. Her hands shook, not from fear, from rage. The kind of rage that clouded vision, that narrowed the world into a tunnel of red. She closed her eyes, whispered to herself, "You're not him, you're not me, you're you." Her father's face flashed in memory. Not in uniform, not with a rifle, just him, kneeling to tie her shoes before school, laughing when she beat him at chess, hugging her mother under a rain-soaked porch. He hadn't been defined by war. He had been defined by love. And she could be too. Her hand steadied, her breath slowed. She listened, not for his voice but for the silence around it. A scrape too faint for most ears, but she heard, 10 meters deeper in, near the cave's right wall. She shifted her rifle slowly, inch by inch. Crosshairs settled on the darkness. And then she whispered, just loud enough for the cave to carry, "I'm not my father." The surgeon's voice drifted back, amused. "No, you're better." A shadow moved, just barely. She fired. The shot ripped through the darkness. A cry followed, short, sharp, cut off by a grunt, the sound of a body shifting against stone. She had hit him, not fatally, she knew the sound of fatal, but it was enough. Silence, then labored breathing. Her heart pounded, not victory, not yet. Because the game wasn't over. His voice came again, strained but still steady. "Good, very good, but can you finish it?" Her scope stayed locked on the darkness. And for the first time since she entered the cave, she realized something chilling. He wasn't afraid, not even now. Because he knew, this was never just about the shot. This was about who she became after she pulled it. What happens when the hunter runs out of shadows? Alexis felt the cave pressing around her, the walls closing in with every breath. The surgeon was no longer just a phantom voice in the dark. He was flesh, blood, and labored breathing. She had wounded him. She could hear it in the hitch of his exhale, the faint wetness in his cough. But still, he moved with the patience of a man who had built his life around silence. Her cheek pressed against the stock, scope trained on the faint outline ahead, a smear of blood on the rocks, proof she'd struck true, proof he wasn't untouchable. And yet her finger hesitated over the trigger. Because even now, even cornered and bleeding, his voice slid through the shadows like smoke. "Your father said your name." Her chest tightened. "He begged me to let him live long enough to see you again." He whispered it like a prayer. "Alexis." The sound of her name on his lips made her stomach turn. "He fought harder than any man I've ever faced," the surgeon continued. "Not for himself, for you. That's the only reason he died with dignity." Her vision blurred. She wanted to scream at him to shut up, to silence the lies. But were they lies? She couldn't know. The surgeon had been there, she hadn't. And for 30 years the truth had belonged to him alone. Her jaw trembled. "You don't get to speak his name." A dry chuckle echoed back. "But I already have." The echo twisted inside her chest. She tightened her grip, ready to fire again, but then she stopped. Because suddenly she realized something. He wasn't trying to survive. He was trying to break her. Every word was a bullet aimed not at her body, but at her soul. And she couldn't let him land another shot. She moved low, fast, rolling deeper into the cave, boots scraping stone. A shot cracked behind her, sparks showering her back. Too slow. He was bleeding, but still deadly. She slid behind a boulder, heart pounding, body coiled tight. This couldn't end in whispers. It was too close now. She unslung her rifle, set it aside, and drew her pistol. Her breath slowed, her world narrowed. One step at a time, she crept forward. The air grew heavier, colder. The cave sloped downward, swallowing her into near total darkness. Only the faintest glow of daylight behind her reminded her of the outside world. And then movement. She swung her pistol. The surgeon stood, leaning against the wall, blood streaking his side. His rifle hung from one hand, barrel dragging against stone. He looked less like a predator now, more like a man stripped bare. But his eyes, those eyes were still sharp, still calculating. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then he smiled. "Now you see it," he rasped. "This was never about the record or the hostages or even revenge. This was about us." Her pistol stayed locked on him, both hands steady, but inside her chest, her heart warred against itself. "Pull the trigger," he whispered. "End it. Prove you're stronger than your father." Her jaw clenched. "You don't get to measure me against him." Everything you are, he said, voice hard now, is because of him and because of me. You carry both of us, one in blood, one in shadow. He leaned closer, eyes burning. The only question is which one wins. Her hands trembled, not with fear, with fury. She wanted to kill him. Every fiber of her body screamed for it. To end him, to erase the decades of pain, to silence the ghost that haunted her family. But beneath that fire, another voice whispered, her father's. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. And suddenly she saw it. The trap wasn't in the cave, it wasn't even in the mission. The trap was in her own heart. If she killed him in rage, she wouldn't free herself. She would chain herself to him forever. She steadied her breath. No, she whispered. The surgeon frowned. What? I'm not you, she said softly. And I'm not him, I'm me. His eyes narrowed. And then, for the first time, she saw something in him she hadn't expected. Fear. Because he realized she had broken free of his game. Her pistol stayed raised, but her finger didn't pull the trigger. Not yet. Behind her, the cave trembled with distant blasts, the seals inside the compound, finishing their fight. Time was running out. The surgeon coughed, blood on his lips. If you walk away now, I'll survive. I'll come back, you know I will. Her voice was calm, steady, final. No, you won't. For a moment, silence hung between them. Then, before he could raise his rifle again, she moved. Swift, precise. Her shot echoed like thunder. The surgeon collapsed, rifle clattering against stone. His body sprawled across the cave floor, eyes wide with something between shock and recognition. He tried to speak. No words came, only a rasp of air. Alexis stood over him, chest heaving, pistol steady. For the first time, she saw not the ghost who had haunted her family, but just a man. Old, broken, mortal. And in that moment she felt no triumph, only a strange, quiet sorrow. Because killing him hadn't ended the story. It had only ended his chapter. The rest that was hers to write. She lowered her pistol, eyes burning. For a long moment she simply stood there, listening to the silence. No more whispers. No more shadows. Just her own breath in the dark. What do you hear when a ghost dies? For Alexis, it was silence. Not the suffocating silence of the cave where every second had carried the weight of death. Not the false silence of a sniper's breath, broken only by the thunder of a shot. No, this was different. This was the silence of something ending, a shadow lifted, a tether cut. The surgeon's body lay still, eyes glassy, blood seeping into the stone. The echo of her pistol shot faded into nothing, swallowed by the mountain. For 30 years he had haunted her family. For 30 years he had written the terms of her father's death. And now, finally, he was gone. But there was no victory, only exhaustion, only the heavy truth that killing a man doesn't kill the scars he leaves behind. Her pistol lowered, her arms trembled, and she whispered into the cave's darkness, not to him, not even to herself, but to her father. It's done. The words broke something inside her. Her knees buckled and she sank against the rock, chest heaving, tears burning at the corners of her eyes. She had held them back for years, through deployments, through training, through every moment she had pretended she didn't need this reckoning. But now they came. Quiet, unstoppable. For the first time in decades, she allowed herself to grieve. Minutes passed, or maybe hours. Time had no meaning in the dark. When at last she rose, she wasn't the same woman who had entered the cave. The hunter was gone. The air of vengeance was gone. What remained was just Alexis Morgan. She stepped into the light. The dawn outside was blinding after so much shadow. Smoke curled from the compound below, but the gunfire had faded. Black hawks circled above, rotors chopping the air. The mission wasn't just alive, it was almost over. Her calm crackled, Hayes's voice hoarse but steady. Ghost Hunter, this is Poseidon. Hostages secured, compound neutralized, status. Her throat tightened. For a moment she couldn't speak. Then she forced the words, "Target eliminated." Static, then Wilson's voice, rough with emotion. "Copy, Ghost Hunter, copy." She could hear what he didn't say. The relief, the grief, the pride. She descended the ridge slowly, body aching, rifle heavy across her shoulders. Each step felt like a lifetime, but the sight below pulled her onward. The seals gathered near the extraction point. Dust swirled in the rotor wash as a black hawk settled onto the valley floor. Hostages huddled inside, pale, shaken, but alive. Operators stood guard, faces streaked with grime and sweat. And when they saw her, they didn't smirk. They didn't doubt. They didn't dismiss. They looked at her with respect. Brooks was the first to step forward. His voice was gruff, almost embarrassed. "Hell of a corridor you cleared." Gave a half-smile, shaking his head. "Double tap at 1200. Never seen anything like it." Hayes didn't speak. He just clapped her shoulder once, firm, and moved on. Wilson approached last. His face was unreadable, but his eyes carried 30 years of memory. He searched her expression, as though trying to find the answer to a question he'd never dared to ask. "Mark would have been proud," he said finally. Her throat tightened. She wanted to reply, but no words came. She only nodded. They boarded the Black Hawk. The world shrank into the roar of rotors, the smell of fuel, the weight of survival. Alexis sat near the door, rifle across her knees, eyes fixed on the horizon. The mountains receded below, jagged teeth fading into shadow. And with them, the ghost of the surgeon. Hours later, the sun hung high over. The airfield bustled with movement, engines roaring, voices shouting orders. But inside the quiet of the debriefing tent, the noise felt distant. Commander Richards leaned across the table, hands steepled, eyes sharp. 12 hostages secured, 0 SEAL casualties, high-value target eliminated. That's a success by every metric. But Alexis didn't answer. Success wasn't the word she carried, not tonight. Wilson cleared his throat. She did what no one else could, and she did it under conditions that would broken most men. Richards nodded slowly. The record shattered twice over, the mission's complete, but her gaze softened just slightly. "That's not what this was about, was it, Lieutenant?" Alexis's eyes lowered. She shook her head once. Richards didn't press. She simply leaned back, exhaled, and dismissed the room. When they left, Wilson lingered. "You carry his eyes," he said softly, "but not his shadow. Don't ever forget that." She looked up at him. For the first time, she believed it. Night fell over the base. The noise faded, replaced by the hum of generators and the distant rhythm of helicopters. Alexis stood alone on the tarmac, journal in hand. Her father's journal. The leather worn, the ink smudged, the pages filled with calculations, lessons, thoughts he had never lived long enough to share in person. She turned to the last page, the one she had always avoided, the one written the week before Mogadishu. It was short, only a sentence. "If I don't make it back, tell her she was the reason I fought." Her breath caught. The page blurred through tears she didn't bother to hide. Closing the journal, she pressed it against her chest. For the first time, she felt not just the weight of his absence, but the presence of his love. Behind her, the night sky stretched endless and dark. The kind of sky her father had once watched, the kind she had fallen through at 30,000 feet, chasing ghosts. But now she wasn't falling. Now she was standing. The surgeon was gone, the record was broken, the mission was complete. And yet none of those things defined her. She did. She breathed in the cool night air, closed her eyes and whispered, not to the ghosts, not to the past, but to herself. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. And with that, she walked back into the night. Not a shadow, not a legacy, but her own story.